Hello and welcome to this short explanation of key points on qualitative methods. I'm just going to take you through some key overall ideas like grounded theory. It's good, isn't it? It's good. Advantage of this. What you want. Keep them interested and entertained. Look at that. Look there. Right. So, qualitative methods. So we go from quantitative to qualitative. The question is why? Why do we go? Why is there an argument about qualitative methods being useful? So, quantitative methods are valued by positivists because they've got high reliability. They're seen as ethical, better representativeness, generalizability. Validity, well, they're reliable data, and so if we have consistent results and we know that the data is accurate according to positivists, they must be true because they're repeating the findings. But there's a major problem with quantitative methods according to interpretivists, and that is the social construction of data. So all data is socially constructed. And I've explained this in my quantitative methods video. I've talked about the problem of the social construction of data. I've talked about the problem with the idea of a suicide rate, the idea of social facts. So I've talked about the fact that quantitative methods offer social facts according to positivists, because we are getting an accurate measure of a phenomenon which has been consistently repeated as a finding in terms of patterns and trends. But the interpretivists, interpretivism view is that this data is socially constructed, so any social fact is not really a fact. In other words, it's not an accurate figure, it's not an accurate measure of a phenomenon. The interpretivist would argue that it's still socially constructed. In other words, it's not possible to achieve objectivity, and that the data is still subjective. Why? Because of consciousness. Because human beings' content of their consciousness, what their definitions, the way of defining the world and behaviour and identity, and their interpretations, the way in which they interpret and perceive the social world, that affects the data that is collected through quantitative methods. So the researcher themselves cannot claim to be objective and value-free. The researchers are not really avoiding bias. They are still biased. They're still influenced by their values and beliefs and background because of the content of their consciousness. This influences the questionnaires, surveys, interpretations of statistical data, the content analysis, all of the things they're trying to measure. A good example of this, I talked about with a group today, was religiosity. So if we try to measure religiosity with a positivist quantitative methods approach, we say that we have to operationalise the concept. In other words, we have to break religiosity down into a measurable form, because it's a concept with many features. And we have to decide what the features are that we're going to measure. So it might be prayer, attendance, worship, beliefs, dress code. And the problem with that, of course, is because that's still, although we can then say, oh, everyone will agree those are the aspects of religion, there's still going to be disagreement held by individuals about what's most important. And every person may consider their view to be valid. So according to interpretivists, the measurement of religiosity is not going to provide factual information if you're only measuring indicators like attendance. You need to know more about why, especially with a subject like religion, which can be increasingly, in today's world, very personalised and individualised and based on autonomous choices. You know, everyone's faith is a personal faith, and that is part of what people say about faith within religions. So that's a key issue. So because of that, we consider there to be problems with quantitative methods. The interpretivists suggest we should use qualitative methods. Qualitative methods offer several advantages in terms of richness of depth and detail, so that they offer a fuller understanding of social life from the point of view of the social actor, the person who lives in the world, whose way of seeing the world you're trying to understand. So Weber described this attempt to achieve an understanding from the point of view of the social actor as Verstehen. So we're trying to achieve Verstehen, we're trying to achieve an empathy with the subject. And then we come to the idea, okay, we've got the social construction of data. All of the data that we get from research tends to be flawed because it's shaped by our own beliefs and values. So the key idea with qualitative methods is grounded theory. Grounded theory. Okay, what does this mean? The feminists talk about this as well, and the interpretivists talk about this. Grounded theory. So we talked about, with quantitative methods, two approaches. In positivism, I've explained in my second video that we have Durkheim. Okay, now Durkheim advocates inductive reasoning. In other words, gather lots of information about patterns of behaviour. So he studied suicide in his classic suicide study, faith, whether someone has children or no children, whether someone lives in the city or the countryside, whether someone is married or single, all of these patterns in terms of suicide rates in those groups. And he was gathering all that information, and then he actually developed a theory after the evidence had been gathered, which was his theory of social integration. Suicide is something to do with social integration, explains suicide. And then Popper had what we call deductive reasoning as his approach within positivism. So Karl Popper advocates deductive reasoning. He says, Durkheim's view, is not rigorous enough. We need to test ideas more to really show that they can be proven because they haven't been disproven. And so he's starting from a hypothesis, a precise prediction, and then from there test it in all your data collection. So grounded theory, as part of qualitative methods approach, is recognising the problem with starting with a hypothesis or a theory and then gathering data. It's saying that this is flawed and this is socially constructed, or it's going to lead to a social construction problem. It's also going to lead to researcher imposition, where the researcher is imposing their values and beliefs on the research process. So grounded theory is actually about first gathering information about the reality of the lived experience of the individual. And so it's starting from the point of view of the individual, achieving that understanding. And that's where it's starting from. So it starts from the individual or group under study. And we're going to gather lots of information about them. So it starts with evidence. And qualitative methods involves detailed, descriptive information in the form of words. So it's detailed information. It's descriptive, and it's in the form of words. It might be words spoken, it might be in a text, it could be in an unstructured interview, a group interview, it It could be secondary data in life documents, like someone's autobiography or diary. So it's describing their feelings, it's describing their thoughts. Now the argument is that if we start from a hypothesis, it starts from the researcher, and then it's always going to be biased in terms of their opinions and beliefs and prejudices. Their preconceived assumptions will shape the way in which they approach the research and how they choose to study it. In this way, in doing grounded theory, we're grounding our theories in the real evidence. So we're trying to understand the lived experience of the subject. So rather than coming from an outsider's perspective on something, I want to study Pakistani identity, it's actually, okay, how do people from a particular background experience the world? How do they see the world? And I'm starting from their lived experience, and it probably needs to be in their own words. Why is that important? Because they need to give information that is authentic. It's about authenticity. It's about truths for people rather than fitting into my value framework or my research system. So it's about authenticity. That's very important. So grounded theory looks from the ground up. It's working from the ground up, and the ground is the evidence, the reality, the truth of people's lived experience. We have how people have lived, how people have experienced the world, and how they see and interpret the world. So we're looking for definitions, we're looking for interpretations, we're looking for perceptions, we're looking for values, we're looking for why. And once we've gathered the evidence, we're doing what we call thematic analysis. Thematic analysis involves studying, reading and transcribing the detailed information that we gather from participants in research. So it involves studying, reading and transcribing detailed information that we gather from our sources and respondents. It might be a discussion we've had with someone, we recorded it, we transcribe the data, and we read through it. Okay, so transcription means that you're literally often going to be typing up the evidence. So I did a life history at university of an older lady, and I actually, she spoke to me for 2.5 hours, and I recorded the whole interview on a mini disc player, and I actually had to type up every word from that interview afterwards. And then I had to analyse it. And what you're trying to do with thematic analysis is very different from quantitative data analysis. So rather than seeing it as a straightforward process of hypothesis, let's map this out. So hypothesis, data collection, and then you see whether you've confirmed or refuted the hypothesis, and then you might have to design a new hypothesis. With thematic analysis, you're going to be reading and transcribing. You're going to be studying the information. You're going to develop theories, but it might be an ongoing process because you're trying to develop a sense of the themes. And then you might do further data collection, which you then keep developing the sense of themes. So for example, it might be that from studying Islamic fundamentalism, if you read a book like Maajid Nawaz, his book about walking away from Islamic fundamentalist group, it's actually saying that there's several issues there, but he was actually imprisoned. He met a group of assassins. He learned things about the problems with the particular ideology. So there are several key themes there. Or it might be that another example of this, a really good example, is Oakley. So Oakley's study of motherhood was using unstructured interviews. And one of the key themes that she mentions is how motherhood is socially constructed. Mothers talk about the pressure in the media to be a good mother by bonding instantly with the child, having an instant emotional connection with the baby. And she found that 70% of the women in her study felt nothing when they first held their child. So her unstructured interviews study, using qualitative methods, unstructured interviews, actually generated a more authentic picture, a more accurate picture, she argued, than if she had used quantitative methods. Because in the unstructured interviews, she was able to build a rapport with the subject and actually develop a closer relationship in terms of being able to open up to each other. She was open about her own experience of struggling with bonding with the child. And so by opening up about her own experience rather than closing off her values and experiences, she was that openness and that involvement with the subjects, with the interviewees, actually meant that they were able to open up and be authentic about their own experience because they trusted the interviewer. And so what this meant is that she was able to develop key themes of media construction of motherhood, gender role socialisation in the family, relationships with a partner, like the husband. And so you can see those key themes are very broad issues. So the key issue, or the key difference between quantitative method data analysis, which is to do with numerically counting up and measuring and putting into percentages and pictorial analysis like pictures, like graphs and pie charts, is that you're getting patterns and trends. But what you get with this approach, they would argue, is more general themes. It's not so precise, but it gives you a greater sense of the world as the subject sees it. According to this view, is preferable because the idea of objectivity is exaggerated and ignores the social construction of data. This tries to avoid the problem of social construction of data. It tries to avoid the problem of social desirability with data. It tries to avoid the problem of researcher imposition with data by coming to the evidence first, coming to the experience of the subject first, and then developing ideas later on. And they are aware of the social construction of data. The interpretivists, of course, are fully aware of this problem. So they develop strategies to try to overcome the continuing problem of subjectivity and social construction through techniques and strategies like reflexivity, being self-consciously aware of your background and how that might impact on your experiences and values and characteristics and how that might impact on the research. So reflexivity, respondent validation, where you actually check back with the subjects and check that your information is valid or accurate, so that's respondent validation. There are a range of weaknesses with qualitative methods. They're criticised for being overly subjective, for lacking objectivity. Positivists would argue this. They're also seen as being, as we said, value-laden. So obviously there's practical problems in terms of access, cost and time. It's difficult to access a group to spend so long with them. People may not agree to take part in such a time-consuming type of research. More costly and time-consuming. Ethically, it can be more problematic because it could be, especially with sensitive issues, that people are encouraged to describe events that may have been traumatic or unpleasant, issues that can be upsetting or personal, like social class and gender and so on. In terms of representativeness and generalizability, it's likely you get a much smaller sample with this approach because it's so time-consuming. And you're less likely to get a good cross-section of a wider group of people. So it's harder to apply the results to a larger target population unless you combine it in a mixed methods approach with quantitative methods. And in terms of validity, they emphasise the reasons why depth gives validity, but the positivists would argue there are problems with validity here. The feminists tend to use qualitative methods because they talk about collaborative and empowering research to overcome mainstream research, which just reinforces patriarchy and observes it without really taking action. This kind of research can take action. Like in Oakley's study, she actually had an effect on her subjects. They actually changed their views about gender because of the fact that she was open about her status as a feminist and her views and experiences in terms of motherhood. The feminists would also talk about the idea of lived experience and grounded theory, to actually ground your theory in evidence, in the evidence of the lived experience of the subject, rather than just in some abstract objective theory. The realists would advocate qualitative methods as being useful in discovering hidden mechanisms and processes and subjective interpretations, but they'd also say that this will lack the reliability of quantitative methods, so they'd advocate a mixed methods approach. And then we can talk about triangulation, combining, checking and comparing results from this type, qualitative methods, with quantitative methods. We talk about methodological pluralism, about all methods being equal based on fitness for purpose. So this method could be useful if we're trying to find out why, whereas quantitative methods are useful for finding out how much and what is the frequency and so on of different behaviours. The realists would talk about pragmatism and the idea that society is an open system, and so we need to be practical, choose the methods that are suitable for the topic. Open systems, society has many levels of social reality, including hidden phenomena and variables. So qualitative methods may explore unexpected factors in a world in which there's rapid change and in which there are many hidden variables that are beyond our control or beyond our ability to observe with large-scale data. But by combining them with other quantitative methods, qualitative methods and quantitative methods together can produce more valid and reliable data by cancelling out the weaknesses of one method with the strengths of another.